Hello and welcome to another episode of Shhh, the talk show. Today's episode is going to be shot and edited a little differently from what you have seen in the past. And we are tackling a topic that has been indirectly something that I've been familiar with a long time and really wanted to talk about. And that is the subject of intellectual disabilities or people living with special needs. Sometimes we call them differently able. Something that's made me very curious is the fact that a lot of Sri Lankans don't really know who these people are or what they're capable of. And we kind of focus so much on their disability that we forget to think about what is their ability. So today we're here at the Shiranee Saram Foundation, which is a center in Colombo that it's not a school, it's actually a training center or a capacity building center where they help and support people living with intellectual disabilities to build their skills. They upskill them, they help them find employment, and they create employment opportunities, which is something that I didn't know existed in Sri Lanka, because a lot of the time we tend to sort of believe that when a child is born with special needs, that child's fate is sealed and that child will be dependent for the rest of his or her life, and that a family would have no option but to sort of cloister that child away from society and protect that child. And there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of disinformation around this subject of what is it like to be a person with special needs and what can a person with special needs actually contribute to their country and to their community and to their families. So with me at the Shiranee Saram Foundation, where we are having this episode, I have two very special guests, and that is Nayanalie and Hashan. And I'm going to start with Hashan. Then Hashan, koi kale indanda meheta avila tiyenne me iskole ta avila tiyenne. You call it iskole or school ekakda metana training center da kohomada eka identify karanne?
SJDSF.
SJDSF. Okay. So podi kale indanda meheta avila tiyenne? ඔය මෙහෙ පටන් ගත්තම කියන්නේ මොකක්ද ඉගෙන ගත්තේ?
කොහොම ඉගෙන ගත්තා?
ඔක්කොම ඉගෙන ගත්තා. මොන වගේ දේවල්ද ඉගෙන ගත්තේ?
ටයිඩයි.
ටයිඩයි වලින් මොනවද කරන්නේ?
ටී-ෂර්ට් හදනවා.
ඔව්. තව මොකක්ද කරන්නේ?
කොකොනට් ෂෙල්ස්.
කොකොනට් ෂෙල්ස්. ඕකේ.
ක්ලීන් කරනවා.
ක්ලීන් කරනවා. එතකොට ක්ලීන් කළා ඒවයි මොකක්ද කරන්නේ?
හැන්දි.
හැන්දි හදනවා. Okay. So right now I am seated again. This is, as you can see, we're shooting on a different day today, and we have most of the members of the Shirani Saram Foundation. Would you call them members or trainees? It's something we are working on actually, to find the word that, like, you know, really captures the spirit of this place as well as their contribution. Yeah. Okay, so the trainees are here today, which is why we thought we need to do a little bit more on a different day to show you exactly what happens here, so that you also can experience this yourself, and it's not just us talking about something. You can see what's happening, and to tell us a little bit more about intellectual disabilities and how as a society we do need to be more sensitized and be more educated on people living with intellectual disabilities. I have the lady who's running the foundation, who is Praveena, but you didn't start this foundation. So if I can get a little bit about the history, how did this place come to be? Right. So my mother, she trained as a speech pathologist and worked as one in the UK. She returned to Sri Lanka in the late 1970s, I think in 1979. And when she came here, there were no other speech therapists here. There was very little understanding of any sort of developmental delay or disability. She started assessment centers and speech therapy clinics at Lady Ridgway Hospital, General Hospital, and she went all around the country actually. So were you around as a child or anything? I was born in 1983. Okay. So I mean, my entire life with her has been, being taken from one place to the other because she was very passionate about her work. So I would sit around in the corridors of Lady Ridgway Hospital. I'll sit around in the corridors of the Dental Institute in Kandy. I'll sit around in Karapiti. It's okay. So when she got here, she found that there really was no understanding. There was a huge amount of stigma. There is still stigma, but maybe not as much. And she told us stories. She'd be in villages doing an assessment clinic or something, and she'll hear about a child that's kept in a cage or tied to a bed, right? And have you seen that sort of thing still being practiced? I haven't. I mean, Colombo is definitely very far from that, or the nearer areas. I talk to people whenever I travel, and I ask, do you see this sort of thing? Do all people with special needs go to some level of schooling? And outside, I mean, I've not seen it with my own eyes, but they say, no, they're kept at home, they're tied up at home. Yeah, I mean, because, if you don't remediate as necessary, you can, some of the people will develop behavior issues. And, how do you cope with that, right? And if you don't know how to cope, some of these families are single parent families. Our service population, we cater across the board to the entire cross-section of society, but we also focus a lot on disadvantaged communities. And there are lots of family problems, single parents, very low education, sometimes drug addiction. And, you try to keep the child physically safe. So what do you do if it's a female child? You make sure she can't get out of the house while the mother is working or something like that, right? So that we have seen in Colombo. So it's tough. So when you were growing up, going back to when your mom actually started running this place and all that, now tell me a little bit about you. Me, because I know that this is, it was her passion and her vocation almost, or her mission in life, but it wasn't yours. No. So, I mean, I grew up very, very close to this organization. She worked in the hospital setting for a decade or so, and then she founded the RCCI, which later became, we renamed it in her honor last year. So she wanted to have more of a community center for the families to have a sense of belonging, actually, to be included in society. And it's not the current inclusive model that we have, but she wanted to give them a place to be. So that's how this organization came to be. I worked here as a child. I was their first art teacher, first cookery teacher. But I wanted to be a scientist, so I studied physics and then neuroscience. But I was always very interested in social issues because that was very close to, how I was brought up, management of organizations. So after grad school, I actually worked as a management consultant. And then in 2014, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. She didn't really have much of, I think she had her idea of a succession plan in her head, which is the assumption that her daughter would deal with it. But her board asked me to help on the board. And that's how I actually got into this in a sort of managing the place kind of sense.
And what made you want to work in this space?
So I got involved with SJDSF during COVID.
Okay.
And that was the time when everybody was working from home, and I got approached by somebody asking if I was able to provide some training for teachers. So that was when I got initially involved, and then when I came here, so SJDSF was run very much, I mean, we were the RCCI at that time, so it was run very much like a school. So there were students in a classroom, and they range from, I don't know, 3 to maybe 40. So came with a backpack and books, and so there was a very different kind of setup. But over that time, the institution was also changing because Praveena had kind of taken over, and she wanted to do things a little bit differently and maybe look at things a little bit more in a progressive way. I'm not by any means saying that a special school setup is not progressive, but she wanted to kind of maybe do something about the adults that came here, right? So, I mean, most of the adults came here because there was no other place to go, and they didn't find any other vocation or any purpose in life, you know. So just like their siblings would kind of finish school and move on to university or do a job, they just ended up, coming to school because that's what was expected of them. So we started doing things a little bit differently. But before we moved on to the actual kind of supported employment and the workshop stuff that we do now, we started kind of focusing more on life skills, on developing meaningful tasks for people, to follow their interests, to actually ask these people what did they want to do. So what were their goals, what were their interests? So were they creative, or did they have more manual skills, or were they able to construct something, or could they just do packing? So that the whole process went through this. And also, I think COVID taught us a lesson in the sense we started working with these individuals while they were at home. So we were working remotely. That also gave us a huge insight as to what their life was like at home. So a lot of these individuals probably had everything done for them. So they didn't have like basic skills, even though they were able to maybe cook or clean or do other things. It was very much like treating, they were treated like.
Yeah, because a lot of parents also don't have the necessary understanding or the support to guide them, to tell them, no, your child can do certain things. And so they think the child is completely helpless, right?
Capable, or maybe out of trying to support them, they were actually disabling them. So that was one of the things that was a really kind of eye-opener for me as well, because often we'd see these students in a school setup, or maybe in a clinic, but we don't really know what's going on at home. So through that process of working remotely and through a camera, we kind of got into their lives, and we started kind of focusing on things like cooking and maybe household tasks, developing some sort of focused skills, so helping them through the tasks and things like that. So
for me also, the other aspect of this is because I was hanging around my mother all through her work. A lot of the people who are are workshop users, some of them are my friends. Like, I've known them since I was 5 or 6. And for me, how SJDSF changed its focus is more to do with what is best practices outside the country, what are the potentials of people with Down syndrome, autism, any other kind of learning disability. Because where I lived before I, moved back here, there are, employers like, the cashiers or the checkout line assistants, they may have Down syndrome. There's a cafe in Princeton called the Blue Bears that's actually staffed entirely by people with Down syndrome. Just the finance manager and the head chef is a neurotypical person. So I sort of saw what's possible. It was very difficult to translate that to here. So that was going to be my question, because you have this exposure to what is the social attitude, or even the even an employer's attitude towards learning disabilities versus how it is in Sri Lanka. When I returned, some of my friends, they're like, we want a job. Like, we are 30 now.
right? So that was one of the things that made me think, like, I've left you guys, I've had a life, I've studied, got married, all of those things. Like, which of those experiences can y'all actually have? And let's see, how much forward you can take that. So they said they wanted jobs, and I was like, actually, why not? Right? Yeah. I've seen that is possible.
So, can you tell me a little bit about when you talk about they have interests and they have skills, and what have you seen now in the short time that you have been working here? What kind of growth have you seen?
So I think a lot of the time when we measure a student's success, it's very much focused on, I don't know, their literacy skills or how they perform in an exam, or we always kind of compartmentalize them to be in a certain profession. Are they good at, certain hurdles that we set up? So the kind of assessments that we do, or the way that we see somebody's progress, is in a very different way. So we want to see how the person is able to adapt to an environment. Are they successful at communicating their needs? Are they able to give feedback on what's going on? Are they able to pick up on something by watching how someone else works? So our assessment process is a little bit different. So when we map somebody's progress, it's in that way. So the difference that I've seen in the way that we've started working is that we do what we call an individual personal plan, which we do together with the student. And rather than asking questions, it's kind of based on scenarios. We use a lot of visual supports, and maybe talking them through stories to help them understand what it's like to set goals, what it's like to identify their interests, what it's like to have a focus on something. So through that, then we're able to guide them to to engage in something that they're actually good at and things that they like, because sometimes what they're good at may not be something that they like. So it's about finding that balance and helping them through that process. So it's a long process, and just like everybody else, interests change. People can become bored doing something, or they might still want to focus on something that they may not be able to do. So it's a process, and it's about balancing. It's a balancing act. It's about getting them through that process.
What is it, do you think, that prevents donors from, I mean, I know how much you struggle to kind of advocate for fundraising and for donors and sponsorships and stuff, and there is this whole thing about what is a responsible corporate citizen, right? Or people love to do charity. Sri Lanka is one of the most generous countries in the world, but somehow charities are cherry picked, right?
Yes. So, I mean, I have some stories to tell there. One thing is that, our building is not crumbling. People are not starving in this organization, right? And that is, like a double-edged sword. It's well run. It has for what it's worth, a foreign educated team running it, and people think we don't have bills to pay, right? So they don't understand that. And obviously, when you're competing, you know, it's some people really do want to focus on the charitable aspect of, like, there's a school with a roof that's collapsing, let's help that, one time, done. Same with a starving population. It's a little bit of a sort of a different way of thinking, that when you help someone help themselves, then at some point maybe you will be done with the helping, right? Maybe they will stand on their own 2 feet, or maybe that family will stand on their own 2 feet, and that is more our goal. I think Sri Lankans are very charitable. Yeah. And there is also a certain idea here, the sort of the ane pau mentality, like ane pau me kattigen wada ganne ai, right? But they want to work. They want to have a sense of community.
And why can't they? That's my thing is, they are capable. They are able.
They are able, they are capable. We get joy from working, right? You get joy from, helping people understand social issues. I get joy from helping another mother with a child who is difficult or, needs help, right? But, somehow there is this idea that, if someone is disabled, we should take care of them by almost infantilizing them, right?
That's more of a disservice to that person.
Absolutely. So that's what I said when I had left Sri Lanka for two decades or more, and I came back, and my friends were in grade 10, and they were in grade 10 for 10 years, and I'm like, what happened, right? What happened to the next stage of their lives? And sometimes it's very hard to get out of the good enough, right? There are so many problems in Sri Lanka. They're safe and they're happy and they're coloring books in a corner all day long and they're 43. What's your problem? They're safe, right? Sometimes it's hard to get families out of that mindset. It's hard to get employers out of that mindset, because one of the things that we currently struggle with our supported employment program is, we are actually very selective nowadays, because we've had some experiences, some that have gone fantastically well and some that have been difficult. And the difference there is, some people actually get it right, that we are trying to bring someone who can contribute to your workplace. We don't want charity, because especially in a tough situation like Sri Lanka is in right now, charity is not fully sustainable, right? We want something that's sustainable. Can someone contribute to your workplace? If you make a few adaptations that you can afford to make to support their entry into your workplace, or the continuous support of them. But we don't want someone to feel sorry and say, oh, you want someone with disability in our office? Okay, we can give them a seat and they can just stay there, color books or whatever. And because that's just a real disservice, right? Because if that person is, bored, then they might disrupt other people. Somebody else might have to take time out of, doing the job that they are expected to do. They probably have targets, and then, keep this person entertained. That's really not what we are looking for. We know that they can contribute, and we want them to. We want them to get the right sort of opportunity so that they can add value to wherever they are. There's obviously also the whole, what you gain from having diverse people. I think it's just good for morale. You get a diversity of ideas. And I have to genuinely say that I have been given ideas about how I should change how I do things, products I should make. I have been told this by some of our team here, and the person has Down syndrome. But I learned something from them.
A little bit about what you do here.
I do on the wrapping paper, and I paint on the Christmas tree.
Yeah. And when I came, I think the last time I came, you were doing tie-dye.
I went up and did on the tie-dye with a dismiss.
And they told me that you're like a machine when it comes to the tie-dye. That you can do a lot of them at once, right? Can you tell me, Vasha, what is it like to work and to make your own money? How does that feel?
I guess and I go shopping. So,
You go shopping. What kind of things do you shop for?
I went in a candy, and I brought all the things I want. In school, I went up and I did all the tie and dye, and here I did this on the wrapping papers. This And this other wrapping paper I did in school.
And you sell them at the shop as well?
Yeah, at the sale.
At the sale. And what's that like? Like, what do you do at the sale? How do you sell them?
I sell a lot of things on the on this toy I did
Yeah.
and the bracelet I did.
The bracelets as well.
Yeah.
They're nice. What are they made out of?
Or the
beads.
Beads I did. So,
Yeah. Those are kind of cool.
Yeah.
We don't think about the people who are actually doing the work, right? What are your needs? What you wish Sri Lanka knew about this job that you do, for instance? Or what do you wish parents of the trainees knew?
Yeah.
Or what would you like people to understand about what perhaps your experiences are?
Yeah, I think that answer probably is going to be at different levels. So if I may kind of speak on behalf of the parents, I think having a child with an intellectual disability is very challenging in a culture like ours, where people often, I mean, it's so competitive. A child's performance is like so, that's what you aspire to. Like they have their grades in school or, what they achieve. So people don't really celebrate people's diverse abilities and their presentation. So it's especially hard for a parent, with a child with an intellectual disability. I mean, parents tell me, often the stories they share are, we often have this thing about, it's something that is a result of something you've done in a past life, or maybe it's something that you do. I mean, there's a lot of ignorance. There's a lot of ignorance surrounding so-called. I mean, we want to show ourselves as a very supportive, kind, caring society, but actually people have a lot of preconceived notions and they bring that into conversation. Intellectual disability is often seen, especially in the early years, it's something that needs to be fixed. But often these conditions are lifelong and people's level of ability, yes, you can change, but it's not about, making them typical, or there's no normalization of that difficulty. It is a disability and people have to live with it, but it's about trying to maximize their potential. And that's what, therapy or support or education should target. But the challenge in working within that setup is that it's very much, it has to be fixable. And people probably don't think of alternatives. So it's that I find very challenging.
Then tell me about your experiences here, about their experiences. Um, can you tell me what is it that people really don't know about what their capabilities are, or essentially the fact that we sometimes, along with infantilizing, we also sometimes dehumanize. Right, we sometimes feel like just because somebody maybe perceives the world differently or behaves or expresses differently, that they also feel differently, or that they breathe differently for some reason. We can't seem to relate unless we actually have a family member.
Absolutely right. And you know what, when we go out, what we find is quite often there is a family member. So we lecture to like workplaces, and there'll be 20-30 people in the room sometimes. And when you ask the question, have you ever, come across a person with Down syndrome or autism or any other, developmental delay, no one will raise their hand. But quite often when we are walking away, someone will come and say, my cousin has it, or someone I worked with before, or it's usually a family member, and it really resonates with them what we are trying to do. And that's to do with the stigma, right? They don't want to own in a public space the fact that they have someone with one of these disabilities. What are they like? I mean, I think they are just like us, because neurodiversity is actually a spectrum, right? Where does one thing start and another thing end? Yes, Down syndrome is genetic, that we know, but, we all have quirks. I think so a lot of people here are extremely social and they struggle just like the rest of us who are sort of on the more social end of the spectrum if you cut off their social outlets, right? Like I see whenever we are closed for holidays, whenever something has happened or they've fallen ill and they can't come to work, I see, my phone starts to ring at like odd hours in the night, and people sound very distressed because, they don't have other outlets. Their whole world is here because in Sri Lanka, there is a lot of judgment when you go out in the world. Stunningly enough, people come to this organization to try and help us, and they sometimes make extremely sort of stigmatizing statements.
Okay, like what? Can you tell me? Because for me also, it's a learning.
Yes.
Right? As well as I think for those of our audiences who are watching, it's definitely a learning because a lot of us don't know what it is that we're saying that's wrong because our behavior has been normalized by society.
Yes, okay, fair enough. So I'll give you specific examples. We had a young lady with a rare genetic condition. She unfortunately passed away last December. That was how our new year started, 31st. Um, she was in a wheelchair. Sometimes her mother, she was very small in stature, so sometimes her mother would carry her, sometimes they would use the wheelchair. And her mother once, told us she was just walking in like a kadamandia, going shopping, and she said a woman passed her by, walked 30 paces in front, turned around, and came back and said, Ane meko age karume bennati. This must be your karma. And she looked at us and said, why did she have to do that? She could have just walked on. Why did she have to like come back and say this and hurt me? Right? So I think people sometimes talk without thinking at all, and I think that's something we would definitely like to change. Think a little bit about what the other person is going through before talking. The other part that I don't really understand is, along with the stigma in this very charitable society, sort of assistance for the families from their communities sometimes seems to just fall away. So periodically we meet with the caregivers to find out what's going on in their lives, what is their support network, because we also try to support the families because they are under extreme stress. So there's one young woman who basically needs a lot of help with her self-care, and she's 18 plus, fully grown, strong, and the caregiver is the grandmother, right? And we are talking amongst ourselves, and we're like, we would like to know what her support network is because she's getting on in years, right? And so we met with her and we asked, like, what is your support network? And she was like, we had a big family, we had a lot of friends, but in Sri Lanka, these are her words, when a child like this is born, that all slowly falls away. And I don't know why it falls away. She's like, now it is just me, and sometimes the lady next door will help me, but that's it. So I don't have an explanation for that because, we take a lot of pride in being a Buddhist nation. We are very spiritual as a majority, talk about charity a lot. But what actually happens in this translation of seeing somebody else's struggle and not wanting to help, I really don't have an explanation for that.
I've also seen, and I would say that I used to be guilty of this as well. Okay, before I understood what differently abled or disabled or intellectually disabled meant, there was this thing of, and I've seen this a lot in society as well, but there's a sort of a fear of engaging with people who have intellectual disabilities. Like if you meet someone with Down syndrome, or if you meet someone who has sort of is obviously autistic, that it's visually present, um, that sometimes you kind of don't want to engage, you move away, or
To do with like misunderstandings and like an I not all, just like all humans, not every person with a developmental disability or Down syndrome or autism is the same. It is a spectrum. Sometimes they worry that they are violent. Are they violent? I mean, obviously, if you kept a child chained to a bed who has a behavioral condition rather than getting them the help they need, yes, that person may be violent. But one of my friends here, she has babysat my 3-year-old, right? I had something going on. My kids didn't have a carer that day, and I brought them here and I put them in the sensory room, and Teruni sat with them, right? So not there's nothing to be scared of. They're just like the rest of us. Another misconception is that it's contagious. That it's contagious. So we will have train young people, then it'll be time for them to get married. Then the in-laws will say, maybe don't be around this sort of place or this sort of children. Because especially if they are hoping to get pregnant, or if they are pregnant, if you see a person like this every morning, your child will also become like this. And this we have heard from schools, not in Colombo, but that in some schools that have special needs units, they are trying to be inclusive. They want to have people, like the government has said, take people with disabilities in. But in that community, the parents don't want their children, or don't want to see, like, I don't know, what the shadow of such a person cross their path or something like that. And we have been told that, special needs kids are put behind a curtain so that, you don't see them first thing in the morning.
wow.
Does it feel like one step forward, three steps back when you work? Or do you see things that really make you feel good, like about the progress that's made?
Oh, I think we've come a long way from where we were. But I mean, if I just kind of look at even things like supported employment, I mean, supported employment is very new in Sri Lanka, especially when you talk about supported employment for people with intellectual disabilities. I mean, it may have been there for people with physical disability or with deafness, or, the likes of visually impaired, who don't really have a significant, the cognitive aspect is not impacted. So there's probably changes that the workplace needs to do for these people, but it's probably not as much, the adaptations are not as much as it would be for somebody with an intellectual disability. So I often find, just to give you an example, I've, been to institutions and, employers talking about intellectual disability, and I've been asked, somebody would say, oh, can you tell me that in 5 minutes? Can you give me that spiel in 5 minutes? So I then kind of come back away from that thinking, if somebody is not going to give me 45 minutes to explain to them about something that they don't know about, they're probably not going to give the time and the support to someone with an intellectual disability who needs extra time, who needs more understanding, who needs more support. So this kind of, this I find a huge challenge. I think Sri Lanka is a society where when you're driving along and you stop at a zebra crossing to allow somebody else to cross the road, somebody's peeping at the back, right? So they want you there. They're so efficient in life that they want to save that 10 seconds to get somewhere. So waiting is not a skill that we Sri Lankans have. So then when you're working or supporting somebody with an intellectual disability, it requires you to wait. It requires you to give time. It requires you to understand, pause. So, where are we in this? We just want, things done quickly. It's not that we're any more efficient than any other, society, but we just want to show that we need things done quickly. Yeah. And so that's a huge challenge when you're trying to convince an employer to employ someone with an intellectual disability.
So what do parents or families of persons living with intellectual disabilities, what do they need to know? Not the families who have the privilege of knowing that you exist, right, and who have brought them here, right, and who have engaged with you and learned more about their ability. But there are so many families out there who don't even know this kind of service exists.
Right. So, one of the other reasons that we switched into the vocational training and the sort of the economic empowerment part was because it's hard to convince people to make an investment in education or upskilling unless there is some payoff, right? Because our system is such that
You want to see the potential.
you have to
or
see
you
the
want to both?
potential.
You want
Yes,
both?
that also, but our system is not geared towards making life easy, particularly for women, right? Our schools are only open till 12. Drop off is at 7:30. If you have two kids, your drop off might be 7:30 and 8 o'clock, 11:30 and 12:30 pickups. And like, so basically like a woman can't work, or like the father who's caring for a child can't work in the morning. So they are taking some of their own resources and earning capacity to put into taking a child or a young adult somewhere to help them get to another place. If the idea is that they will never go anywhere else, they will always be dependent, why would you do that? Maybe it's better to like save that money for when you pass away, so that you can pay for the care home that will take care of a person, right? So what we wanted to do was actually show that, hey, these are people who can contribute, who can look after themselves. We do a lot of life skills training here so that they are not dependents. They go home, they can make their own snack, they can make their own tea, they can go to the grocery store, help mom, right? And through the bringing in a salary thing, you show that they can actually contribute to the family in that way as well. So what we want people who don't know of our place to know is that when you are told your child has a special needs, it's not a lifetime. It doesn't need to be a lifetime of that person being dependent. If you, get the right remediation, the right sort of training at the right time, the critical window, they can get quite far in how independent they are. I mean, even in our workshop, you will see different levels of abilities. And quite often it's to do with how much the parents invested in the person, in including them in everything they do, taking them out, helping them meet other people, sending them to school. There are some parents who have taken the child out of Sri Lanka for a while, for at least the younger years. And, we are the beneficiaries of that because they've come to us not needing, so much help. Because what happens here quite often is our system, we try to be, I think there are some directives from the education ministry, for example, that say that you should take all. It's actually misunderstood. The directive itself is not a problem, but some schools have misunderstood it and they think all kids are required to be in a mainstream school. But then they don't have the educators, the training, the facilities to accommodate them. So Nayanalie has had parents come to her and said, I went to a school for 13 years. They make the mother come and sit with the child also. So both these people have been sitting in a school and they come out with like no skills. They can't feed themselves. No one has encouraged independence. But what we want people to know is, as you get closer to like 12 or 14, talk to people who are, who are fostering independence, so that you can maybe take your child to the next opportunity. Because we want to work with young people and help them get the skills so that, when they're 18, 21, they can actually take a role in another organization and earn a salary and,
I want to pick on something that you said a little while ago about the way Sri Lanka treats women differently, or employs women differently. When it comes to people living with these disabilities, do you find that there is a difference in the way the girls are treated versus the boys are treated by society, by employers that you might approach?
No, because I think you were talking a little bit about the othering, right? So you're a woman, I'm a woman. They are a them. Sometimes they're called an it. Very rarely, thankfully, but they are sort of desexualized, which is a problem in itself because, as I said, everyone's on a spectrum, right? So they do have desires, they want to have relationships, they see their sisters and brothers.
Taken advantage of?
I have. Yes, I mean, obviously in Sri Lanka there is the whole very much talked about green cabin incident. He was one of my mother's patients. Yes, but anybody who with diminished capacity in Sri Lanka may be taken advantage.
So we did an episode sort of a couple of episodes ago. We talked about people living with disability, which was physical impairments, and there we actually discussed how girls, especially with certain physical impairments and disabilities, have been sort of over sexualized, made use of. But I know that people, for instance, somebody who presents as Down syndrome and autism can be misused or abused.
They can be groomed more easily, perhaps. I mean, I work in Colombo, and I haven't heard that directly affect the young men. Yes. So we've had some young men come from having tried working elsewhere, and quite often they have been ill-treated or misused. Happened in a hospital. He's quite a capable young man. We, help him with his mental health and other health needs. We advise him on, where to go. I think an orderly, tried to pull him into a room, and he's capable of taking care of himself. So he had shouted and said, "I don't want this," and another patient had come to his aid. Similarly, when they work, sometimes people know that they are, trusting, and they'll use them to go buy drugs or something like that. So that sort of misuse, yes. I haven't recently heard a, horrible sexual harassment story, but people also don't talk about them here, right? Yeah. So there are some times where we've seen like behavior changes, and we've tried to follow up with the parents, like what's happened. They might just say after an incident, and we don't know what sort of incident.
So the trainee wouldn't tell you about that incident.
So sometimes they are not verbal, right? So they are not verbal. Our cohort is now different compared to, the people that we had in some cases 5 years ago. So I mean, we've had situations where, we feel that maybe something happened somewhere, like at home or whatever, but we don't know what caused this change. If, parents won't come and, tell us. And we all know, right, like the statistics for sexual harassment and things like that. It's apparently like 1 in 3 women, and it's usually by someone they know. So then people don't want to talk about someone they know.
What do you think it will take for Sri Lanka to stop sort of stigmatizing intellectual disabilities this way, and to be sort of to talk about it without, especially for families to not feel like they have to hide these children away?
I mean, I feel like, it takes much more of the work that we do, right? Where the person with intellectual disability is actually accepted as a member of society who deserves to be there. It's not because of their parents' karma. They are contributing, and then they are valued, right? You need that to happen before people feel bad for having had that child, or being made to feel bad for having had that child, right?
I'd like to know, like, in terms of what are some of the good moments that people don't expect from, they don't expect personality, they don't expect likes, dislikes, they don't expect a voice, a choice. What can you say about that?
I mean, I think it always amazes me when people come and see our students actually manufacturing something, when they're going through that process, and people are like, oh wow, they can actually do all the steps of this exercise. They're actually producing something that is meaningful, that can be sold, that somebody would be happy to pay, to buy. It's not kind of the charity mentality that, somebody's holding your hand while you're manufacturing this. Because sometimes when they meet somebody for the first time, okay, maybe that person cannot speak. So when they don't speak and interact with you in the same way, you don't expect them to have enough manual dexterity or be able to follow certain instructions or, actually engage in something meaningful. So sometimes, when we've gone on kind of employment visits where we try to train people out into supported employment, people would say, oh, I don't know how to talk to this person because, he can't talk back. And we're like, he can follow instructions or he'll watch what you do and he will learn. So, just because somebody has an intellectual disability doesn't mean that they have, yes, they might have learning needs, but it's not that they're incapable of learning. There's some level of learning that they can actually do. And it's about adapting the task and it's about adapting your instructions. And that often people find it very difficult to understand.
Because I saw Varsha working on the tie and dye and she was like a machine.
Absolutely.
And I think she was putting out, like Praveena said, about 20 to 25 t-shirts a day. And I was like, whoa, okay.
And she enjoys what she does. And that's that's also an important factor.
Yeah. Hashan කැමතිම මොනවාද? tie and dye එකටද coconut shells වලටද නැත්නම් වෙන මොනවාද කරන්න කිව්වේ? Singing කරනවා. But හදනත් ඒවා jewelry හදනවද නෑ bags මොකක්ද එකක් හදනව නේද?
paper bags හදනවා.
paper bags අන්න හරි paper bags හදනවා. ඒ වුණාට අර හදන දේවල් තියෙන්නේ. හදන දේවල් වලින් මොනවාද කැමතිම?
coconut shells.
coconut shells. Okay. ඒවා පාවිච්චි කරලා තියනවද? ඔය ස්පූන්ස් ටික පාවිච්චි කරනවද හැදුවට පස්සේ? ගෙදර ගෙනියනවද? හදන දේවල්.
නෑ.
නෑ. මෙහෙ තියලා යනවා. ඒකෙන් කුක් කරන්නේ නැද්ද? උයන්නේ නැද්ද?
තාම ඒක මැදලා නැහැ.
ඕකේ. තාම මැදලා නැහැ. තාම පොඩ්ඩක්
අලුත් තාත්ති මට අලුත් මේක කරන් දුන්න කළු පාට කාඩ් එකක්.
ඕකේ. ඒ කියන්නේ අර මේ සෑන්ඩ් පේපර් එක.
ඔව්.
ඕකේ. ඉතින් ඒක හැමදාම කරන වැඩක් නේද? ඒක කැමතිද ඒක එහෙම කරන්න කියන්නේ අතට හිරිහැර වෙන්නේ නැද්ද? like
gloves දාගෙන
කරන්න. Okay. Tell me about the work that they do currently from the foundation. I know that some are employed as well, right?
Yes, so some of them are, so most of our students work in the workshop and they manufacture some of the products that Hashan was talking about. And that's what we sell in our shop and in the sales. But we also have a stream of supported employment where our students go out into the community and work in mainstream setups.
Right.
So they may work in a cafe or, in a shop or engaged in, some sort of formal, in a formal work setup. So I must say that the workshop setup is quite familiar to people, right? Supported employment is definitely a new concept for Sri Lanka. So wherever it's done at a very minor scale. Because we're a long way away from sensitizing other employees to have a colleague with an intellectual disability. And the support and the time that it takes, a lot of employers find it challenging. But I don't think, looking at the future, that supported employment is going to be an option. It's going to be a necessity, because we can't call ourselves a society that's inclusive and progressive if we're going to, move ahead with leaving more, a certain percentage of...
But there are best case scenarios outside of Sri Lanka, right? There
Absolutely.
are best practices outside where this has been done quite successfully without it coming at a major cost to the employer at all. Right?
Absolutely. But that actually that process has taken time. So people's understanding has grown, and you do have certain societies that are more inclusive and progressive in their thinking. So, so we need to kind of step away from that charity-led, care-led kind of setup and move on to a position where we think, okay, what are this person's skills, and is this person actually able to make a meaningful contribution into my workplace? Because it's not about giving them money for charity, it's about giving them value and paying them for the work they do.
අඳිනවාද?
ඩ්‍රොයින් කරනවා.
ඩ්‍රොයින් කරනවා. මොන වගේ ඩ්‍රොයින්ස් කරන්න කැමතිද? පේන්ටිං කරනවද?
ෆෝන් එකේ Wi-Fi දාලා ඒකේ තියෙන pictures
Okay.
අඳිනවා.
Ah. Okay. Nice.
So tell me some of the good stories here, some of the success stories, maybe some of the experiences that sort of you had with your friends and with your team here that people might be like, oh, I didn't know that was possible.
So, I mean, one of the things that people are surprised by is that we pay them a stipend for their contribution. And, you know, it's variable depending on how independent they are, how much they need the help of one of our teachers. But the first time they got their stipend, just the joy was palpable. Everyone was talking about, you know, I took my mom for a coffee, or first salary, right? First salary. And that's the thing, right? They're just like us, you know, first salary, we remember what we did. And I bought a handbag. They'll come and they'll be like, oh, look, I bought this purse. And it's just like so much joy. And generally what I love about this place is that there is a lot of joy on this workshop floor. When I walk in, it's all smiles, it's all highs. Nobody's just completely stuck in their laptop, refusing to even look up at you. They bring a lot of joy to our lives, actually. Because, you know, sometimes it's good to have a simpler outlook on life, right? And that's what we love.
And you have a lot of stars here. You have quite a few stars, right? You were talking about models and dancers.
Yes. We have 3 aspiring models. Chalinda here is a singer. He serenades us from time to time.
Hashan also sings.
Hashan sings. He's not here at the moment. He's traveling in Australia. But there are dancers. So Teruni Varsha, there are artists. Pretty much all of them have skill in art. Shanuki Pereira, the artist, she comes and does art therapy, but we also use the things that they paint in our product line to decorate bags and things like that.
And how about your staff? I mean, you do have, I would imagine that it's difficult to find people with the right passion and the right competencies to sustainably keep running this place, right? Without it being a burden on those who are already here.
Yes, I mean, I think that's always been very hard. A lot of the people that we end up retaining, there is some story, whether they've told us or they've been too ashamed to tell us, then it later comes out. There is some connection to special needs. One of our teachers, her sister, has been in our workshop for years. The other is just, you know, they have something in them that they get it. They have the compassion, the patience. You need an enormous amount of patience to do the work that they do. But now I feel like it is also less demotivating, right? Because people don't stay here, as I said, in year 10 for years. They progress, they make something. There's something changing. Maybe they are always going to be in our workshop, but the products we make may change.
So is it easier to find staff now?
I mean, it's never easy because I think, you know, fundraising is hard. Our salaries could possibly be more. But, you know, we are happy with the team that we have. It would be easier if we had people who are sort of you know, plug and play almost. They come trained with the right sort of ideas. But I feel like the more progressive of the places in Sri Lanka, even preschools, the teachers are very young, and I feel like it's to do with someone having a bit of an outside the box for this country way of thinking, and they find it hard to get trained people, because then they have to undo all the stigma, like for example, in Sri Lankan schools, the teacher is like a god, right? And yes, people who teach us deserve a lot of respect, but you have to think a little bit about what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, right? We can't have like a 20-year-old teacher being worshipped by a 40-year-old workshop participant. It's, it's not good. And if you force them to do that, that's also a different, whole different thing. And sometimes when someone comes to us with an attitude like that, we just like find that somewhere along the line it breaks down, because then they won't get the next part about, we are trying to foster independence. This is not a charity case. This is a person. Exactly. And it's good to do charity, but we are doing something different here.
තව දෙයක් කියන්න පුළුවන්ද?
ඕන දෙයක් කියන්න.
මගේ සිහින ජොබ් එක
Okay. Yes.
මම ආසයි ටයිඩයි ටී-ෂර්ට් සේල් එකක් දාන්න.
Okay. ඒ කියන්නේ කවදා tie-dye t-shirt එක sale දෙකක් කරන්න.
In terms of our goals for like the country and our community, the special needs community, we would like there to exist more places like that, like us, and for it not to be concentrated just in Colombo, right? We would like.
So is there an expansion plan, a dream?
I mean, that is the dream, right? That, we do a little bit of services to people who are near enough to travel to us at least once in a while. We try to train them to do work from their homes, like learn some sort of craft. We'll maybe purchase it back from them. We'll help them with the raw materials, and maybe they can earn something that way. But ideally, we would love to train sort of job coaches all over the country. We would like everyone who, has a child with a special need to know that these avenues are open if they, get the right education, know the whole process, right? I think in other countries you get much more visibility into, okay, a child with Downs was born. Now I see a young person with Downs working in my supermarket. So, it's possible you think more about, okay, what are the next steps, right? Yes, I think the goal with SJDSF, the other thing that we have, like, why do we have such difficulties with funding? Organizations such as us in other countries, for example, there will be 5 agencies doing all that we do. And there is not a tokenistic, but there are like real targets for inclusion, right? And you hire maybe consultants to help you get there. So in another country, instead of us, this is very early days for Sri Lanka, right? Like I always laugh to my friends saying, what do I do? I'm a professional beggar. So you either beg for money or you beg for opportunity, right? So you can't go and say, here, this is this new thing that you have never done. Please let me prove to you that this will add value to your workplace, and hey, pay me for it also while we are at it, right? That just doesn't work. So you try to get in with people who at least understand what you're trying to do, are open to being truly inclusive, adapting the workplace, supporting people be employed, and then following the best practices. The dream would be that one day, people would pay you for that service, because it is a service. We are capacity building in an organization, right? So that's maybe like the 30-year goal or something like.
Fingers crossed it'll happen way before 30 years.
We will see.
Talk about it. What are the many ways in which people can be a part of the work that you do?
So we have many avenues actually. Obviously, the biggest thing would be to support us if you have the means with the funds, because that's what, instead of in growing our programs or supporting more people outside of Colombo or something, most of our time goes into like, oh my God, how do we pay the bills at the end of the day? So obviously, if you have the funds, donating to us. Obviously, if you're an employer, having a conversation about what it would take to employ someone who is differently abled. If you are, out and about, make people feel welcome. If you are in a church or any place that has sales opportunities for the products that we make here, hosting a sale, enabling.
And for now, the products are available where?
So they're available through our shop at Good Market every Saturday. We have a stall sponsored by one of our donors. We do various pop-ups at corporate campuses, corporate headquarters. So if you have a work in a large building with a sizable population of people working there, help us organize a stall there. We do everything. We just need like someone to give us 2 tables and 4 chairs. We'll do everything else. Have a lot of sort of capital improvements. The bill, like the roof is leaking. We don't have enough lights because this building came up behind us and now it's much less bright than it used to be. So simple things like, do we have needs that someone can fund? Absolutely. We could do with paint, fixtures. They're starting a new dog biscuits business and they're cooking the biscuits in like small batches. Obviously that affects like profitability. If somebody could donate like a oven, that will make it like so much easier. Tons of things like that.
Okay. Thanks so much. And I do want to go around and maybe
Absolutely, yeah, sure.
Then make Christmas වලට හදන්නේ මේක.
ක්‍රිස්මස් වලට හදන්නේ.
මේ painting කරලාද රෑන් එක ගන්නෙ?
සල්ලි හම්බ කරලා.
සල්ලි හම්බ කරනවා painting වලින්.
ඔව් මම මේ ඔක්කොම ටික දාලා ඊට පස්සේ විකිනුවාට පස්සේ ඉස්කෝලේට සල්ලි හම්බනවා සැලරි එකක් මටත් සල්ලි හම්බ වෙනවා.
ශලින්ද මොනවද කර මේ ඔයාලා ගිය මාසේ හම්බුන පඩිය මොකද්ද අම්මව කොහෙද ගෙනිච්ච නේද ඔයා?
ඔව් මම පාක්කියු ගෙනිච්චේ.
පාක්කියු රෙස්ටෝරන්ට් එකටද? සැලරි එකෙන්ද ගෙව්වේ?
ඔව්.
ශලින්ද තව මොනවද ඔයා කරන්නේ මෙහි?
තව මම ටයි ඩයි කරනවා බ්‍රේස්ලට් හදනවා බෑග්ස් හදනවා
කේකරි එකේ මොනවද කරන්නේ?
කේකරි කරන්නේ වාජන ටික හොදනවා ඊට පස්සේ සින්ක් එක හොදනවා ඩිෂස් වොෂ් කරනවා ඒවා තමයි කේකරි කරන්නේ කරලා ඊට පස්සේ ඒවා ඔක්කොම කරාම 3 months ඒකේ ට්‍රේන් වුණාම තව ලොකු රස්සාවක්
තව ලොකු රස්සාවක්.
Shalinda is part of our supported employment program. We start them off in our workshop and give them the experience of being in a workplace, and we also observe them to see what their skills are, whether they need some additional help, and then we take them for the work options to see how they work in a new setting with people they haven't met before, and then the bigger goal is, should they have the independence to place them elsewhere. Like for example, our pilot was done with barista. So we have a young man working there. It's more than a year now that he's been there. Everybody is like super happy. So that's sort of that's our process.
මම මේ ඔක්කොම ටික දාලා ඊට පස්සේ විකිනුවාට පස්සේ ඉස්කෝලේට සල්ලි හම්බනවා සැලරි එකක් මටත් සල්ලි හම්බ වෙනවා.
දැනටත් සැලරි හම්බ වෙනවනේ?
ඔව් මටත් සල්ලි හම්බ වෙනවා සල්ලි ටික එකතු කරලා කවදා හරි මම බෑන් එකක් ගන්නවා කට්ටියටම එන්න පුළුවන් එකක්.
ඒක වෙයි කියලා මම ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා.